Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. You're about to listen to the show, and I just wanted to make sure that you've heard about my best-selling book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's the only book out there that teaches you how attackers target you and how you can divide your life up into sectors and look at each individual sector of your life from the attacker's point of view. So then you can turn around and make true defenses, have true awareness, and understand where you could be a victim. It also has 2 workbooks, a threat assessment workbook and a defense assessment workbook. Both are fillable. And also for your children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. It's all pictures with lessons that they can learn about safety and security, awareness and communication, all embedded in the pictures. And the parents can go to teamlittlebigs.com and download the lesson plans so they can give the book to the child can go through the pictures, and the parent can teach them as they go through there. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's 2 workbooks, and The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. Go check them out wherever books are sold, and let's start the show.
I want to bring in an expert on this. Phil Mudd, you've come to know as part of the CNN family, former CIA counterterrorism official, and obviously counterterrorism analyst. What you're seeing right now worries you, actually, in some ways, more than 9/11 did. Why? Explain.
I would say worries. I'd use another word. It makes me more nervous. If you remember everything from polling numbers to how America celebrated the death of Osama bin Laden 10 years later, 9/11 was a unifying period. A lot of Americans don't have passports. They don't see third world countries where the line between chaos and a working democracy is pretty narrow. Americans have the luxury, and let me tell you, it's a myth, the luxury of believing that line between chaos and democracy is a mile wide. It's not. My bottom line about why I'm nervous is when I look at this, it makes me remember traveling overseas and remembering how comfortable Americans feel and believing that what we have today will last forever. I'm not sure it will. Because if I walk down the street in an urban area I live in, we live in a myth that says every child is given a chance, every American is equal. The Constitution says that, the Founding Fathers say that. In the housing projects I live near, those kids will never have anything close to the opportunity that I had. They are separate and unequal. And until we accept that some people in this culture get a chance and some don't, some people get abused by police officers, I never will, we're going to have a problem in this country, and it might get worse.
This is Jonathan Gilliam, and this is the Experts Podcast. And we are dropping some hammers today. And as you know, the truth has arrived. You know, a lot of the times, well, most of the time, I record this podcast either in the middle of the night or in the morning when everybody else is actually just about to get up, because like a lot of operators, I just don't sleep that much, it seems like. And my hours now, because of all this stuff, have just been completely upended. And so, you know, I'm mostly creative at night. But for the past 6 days, I've pretty much been watching the coverage of these riots. Not protests, or riots. And that soundbite that I just played a second ago, I'm going to go through the whole soundbite. And what that was Phil Mudd on CNN. Now, you may or may not know who Phil Mudd is. I'm actually surprised when I look on Twitter and he gets, of course, the leftists sing his praise. Phil Mudd, I I talked about him on my old show, The Experts, that was the video cast. Phil Mudd is a very interesting character. He was a CIA analyst, was never an operations officer. So he wasn't a ground operator in the CIA. He was an analyst. He's very bookwormish and very odd. He's just an odd individual. And he has numerous times on CNN, once he discovered, how he can make waves, he started, one time he cried on television. He yells a lot. I've been on with him before. He's totally disrespectful, doesn't even consider the other person that's on there that may have an opinion about something that's going on as well. Just a total jerk from what I can tell. I've never been in studio with him. I've just been on an interview where he was in a remote location. I was in the CNN studio when I was a contributor there. Just a total weirdo. And the thing is, when he speaks and he analyzes these things, he's gotten progressively bolder in the way he relates his personal leftist political views, which are not uncommon for CIA at all, and executives in the government as far as that goes. He has become more and more emboldened to dramatically just let it fly on the way he truly is. Now, he is on CNN, so it's understandable that he fits in so well there. But when you look at his resume and the way that he jumped from, entering into the CIA in 1985 and within 10 years was kind of already in a management type of position, the type of people that move in that direction that quickly, those are people that truly are not usually good at their job, and their whole goal, it doesn't matter where they are in life. They could be in the federal government or they could be in any other job. Their goal is to be in a management position because they're not in it for the love of the skill set that you're taught or the draw to that. They're in it because of the title. They're in it because of the prestige. And these types of people, when they get to a management position quickly, they all get there quickly. When they get there, they believe they know more than the people that they're managing. And quite frankly, that is normally not the case. I would say 90% of the time. And the federal government is the worst, at least in the military. There are idiots that get promoted in the military a lot. And I would say that the majority of people who make it past 06 in all the branches of the military, 06 is a designator for rank of the officer in the military, and 06 it's just below admiral or general. Most of the people who make it above 06 into the admiral or general category are very political, and they are pulled up, not they don't climb up. And that's why you see great leaders get out at the 06 position. It's unbelievable how many people I've met in my life, who were the 06, the colonels, or the captains in the Navy, and you meet them and you talk to them, you're like, man, this is a leader. But for some strange reason, they were never promoted because they weren't pulled up because they're a threat to true leaders. Now, it sounds like I'm going completely away from the soundbite, but you have to understand, before I dive into these sound bites, I have to tell you who the person is, the so-called expert, as Chris Cuomo introduces him, the so-called expert. I have to let you know who the reality of who that person is. Phil Mudd never grew up in the projects. Phil Mudd, I don't know whether or not he was poor or not, but most likely not, by the way he describes the people that and you're going to hear it in the soundbite, his friends and the people that he knows, and how the projects just down the street, as though that's supposed to associate him with people who live in the projects. He is not an expert in inner city life. I grew up extremely poor, and I can't even begin to explain to you the depths of poverty that I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas with nothing. And although I never lived in the inner cities in a big city, when I was in the FBI, I worked almost extensively in the inner cities for years. If you've been poor, you have a very deep understanding, whether you realize it or not, with the issue that's happening in the inner city. And quite frankly, Phil Mudd is 180 degrees out from that, as is Chris Cuomo. Now, one thing I will tell you, well, let me just say one other thing about Phil Mudd. This guy, once he got to a management position, somehow he jumped on this silver bullet, which also happens a lot of the times with people who get into the most incompetent people who get into a leadership position are the ones who excel the fastest to the top because, again, they're pulled to the top, but they are people who play the game. You know, Gavin DeBecker, who wrote The Gift of Fear, which is, I believe, a terrible book from an operator standpoint because he's not an operator. Gavin DeBecker said in an interview once that he was telling the story how he had never flown on a private jet before, and when he got on there, he just made believe that he had been on there 100 times, and everybody treated him like an equal when he got on that plane. And that's why Gavin DeBecker is a success, not because he has knowledge in anything. He's not a security expert. Although he claims to be, and people buy off on it, and he owns a big security company. The guy has never been in law enforcement, never been in the military, yet he's in charge. His company's in charge of protecting tons of celebrities, and he's on the board of advisors for the FBI's behavioral science unit, which is beyond me. I'm not even sure if the guy graduated from college, but he grew up as a rich kid in Beverly Hills whose dad was an alcoholic, and he parked cars for celebrities before he started his own little security thing where he would do security at parties, and that's how he worked his way into this. But he's a guy who is a narcissist, because I know people who work for his company, and they all have to read his books and stuff. It's really strange, but he's a guy who projects his lie so well that people buy off on it. And that's the way that a lot of these bosses are in the federal government. And this guy, Phil Mudd, rides this silver bullet and he is appointed, okay, by Robert Mueller as a deputy director of the FBI to come over and perform duties as the first director of the counterterrorism division. So if that tells you, if that doesn't tell you, he was the branch's first ever deputy director. Let me say it that way. And then he resigned from government service in March 2010. Probably the best thing ever happened to the government. One of the best things. People like this are exactly who you don't want to listen to. If you want to understand the inner city, talk to somebody who's been poor, talk to somebody who's worked in or around the inner city, talk to somebody who's lived in the inner city. A lot of the times, though, I'll be honest with you, people who grew up in the inner city, it's such an incredibly bad situation that even they don't realize the truth of what's happening. And that's often the case. You know, I've said this before, that people that work in government are actually some of the most blind people when it comes to understanding the corruption of the government. And that's why this whole thing, a lot of these riots and things that are going on in the way that the public comes down on police, it's a mystery to a lot of cops. They don't get it at all because they are a cop. And they know in their mind and in their heart that the people don't see what they're seeing, what they're going through. And so it's hard for them to understand exactly why people hate them so much. And it's the same thing with people who live and grew up in the inner city. A lot of people you can talk to and get good, and they're going to give you great insight to it. I'm not saying you should discount what people say. That if you want to know the truth about living there, talk to people that grew up there. But a lot of the times, people that grew up there, their political leanings, when it comes to politics and when it comes to their opinions of police, it's really kind of skewed because the reality of what's happening and what they grew up in. Now, but people like Phil Mudd and Chris Cuomo know nothing about it. They've never spent any extensive time living, working in, or being in an environment where they're poor. They don't know that world. They don't know that life. So this is something that you have to understand when you listen to people on TV, and I've I don't watch the news at all anymore. I mean, I go through the headlines on the computer every day to see exactly what's going on. If I need to watch something, I'll go turn the TV on. But overall, I don't listen at all to shows that are on, because they're full of narratives, and it's going on right now as we even speak, on the TV. I'm sure I could turn it on right now, and there's several narratives which I'll talk about about these events that are occurring on a minute by minute basis on many of these different networks. But I have to tell you, over the past week, it's been almost 7 days now, 6 days of riots. I have been glued to the television, and mostly, when everybody else is asleep, I'm up and live tweeting. And that way I can go back and look at these tweets. It's kind of a historical account, but also I have to point out the ridiculousness of some of the stuff. And trust me, for the liberals listening, I don't pull punches on Fox News. If you think I'm some kind of Fox News lackey, I'm not. I mean, I used to be on Fox just like I used to be on CNN, and I've been on every major network that there is. Fox is completely destroyed, with the exception of a couple of people that work there. It is from a journalistic standpoint a disaster. It is. I say this over and over again. CNN and MSNBC, they don't hide the fact that they truly believe in the leftist movement. Fox lies, and they don't do it very well at all. Roger Ailes, love him or hate him, whether he's a pervert or not, was a constitutionalist, and he understood the reality of what was happening in this country and who the enemies of the country were. I don't care what you think about him. He understood that. And when he left, so did the experts. They weren't worried about the experts. The Murdoch brothers are not concerned with expert analysis. They only are concerned with ratings and competing with CNN and MSNBC, and like other networks, have moved to the center because they do not believe that the conservative, I don't want to use the word narrative, they don't believe that the way that Roger Ailes did the news was true reporting. They thought that it was a weirdo conservative slant. And if you look at One American News and the way that they report their news, I can guarantee you that the Murdoch brothers and Rupert Murdoch think that One American News is slanted far to the right, and they're not. They just report the facts. And when you look at what they report versus what now Fox reports and what CNN reports, it looks like they're far right, but they're not. They're not middle of the road. They report the facts. So when you hear me, I don't have an allegiance to any of these groups, and I'm not concerned. One of the freest things that ever happened to me was to stop, and this has hurt me financially, I guarantee it, but I don't care anymore what they think. I'm not looking to be famous on the news. Listen, I'll be honest with you. If Fox News called me today, I would be on there. And I would go on there and I would give the truth. I don't think I'd go on CNN or MSNBC because it wouldn't matter what I said. It's going to fall on deaf ears. And the majority of it, I wouldn't be able to say what I wanted to say anyway. They would cut me. I've been cut off there before when I was actually a contributor. But with Fox, I would jump on it so I could go. And even if I did one segment and that was it, I would go there and I would lay the truth down. But I don't care anymore. I really don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I have this, this podcast. I have social media where I can tell the truth. And quite frankly, I really, to be honest with you, I'm not, and I've come to understand this. I am not a chosen one. Not that I ever thought I was, but the people in media that their name starts to get bigger. It's just like what I was talking about with the federal government. The chosen ones get pulled up, And they get chosen not because they're the greatest at what they do. They get chosen because they are willing to ride the narrative. And I am not the prettiest person in the world. I am not the most well-spoken person in the world. I have a radio voice. I have a talent for that. And I do have a talent for explaining things on the level that people can understand. But I'm not a Harvard or Oxford graduate with perfect English. That's not who I am. And when you look at the people, it's like Fox News has turned into the Pee Wee Herman show. There's like multiple people on there that are, they look like, and if you're Mormon, I'm not, coming down on you, but listen, let's be honest, you're probably the most white bread group of people that there are in the United States. It's like the Mormon channel, but it's ran by the leftist, Rupert Murdoch and his brother and his sons. It's ran by leftists, and they've picked and chosen people that they think the rest of the country are going to buy off as being lily white conservatives, because that's what they think that everybody wants to see and hear. And I don't fit that category because I grew up in a trailer park. And before that, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, the whole time poor. And you know what? I'm fine with that. Now, it sounds like I'm ranting all over the place, but I'm not. The reason I'm taking you through this whole valley and of who I am, who Phil Mudd is, and explaining how the media is because you have to understand what is happening now that you see in media, that you see in politics, that you see out there on the street with all these riots and things going on. This is all, it's not a plan like the Q people think, okay? This is a real plan. The left has been organizing these things for over 50 years. And progressive subversion has been around for thousands of years. So it's not anything new anywhere, because progressivism it's the political ideology of Satan. You have to realize that. And I'm not saying that like a religious zealot. It is the truth. When you look at the way Satan is described in the Bible, when you look, and I've said this before, Satan is real. You kind of have to be very careful. For all you atheists out there, agnostic people who are searching, you have to be very careful of what you read and who is telling you about God. Because there's many, many people who will tell you things to gain your attention and then gain your trust, because they're liars. They're manipulators of the reality of who God is. So there's many, many different organizations or religions or places that will lead you to believe that their deity is the right deity. You have to really be careful and look at the 10-foot version, the 10,000-foot version, and the space version looking down. I mean, you can see God where God exists, but there's a lot of fake prophets out there and a lot of groups and religions that will lead you astray. However, in every single one, Satan is portrayed the same way, with the exception of satanic worshipers. But that says something. That signals something. Because it's like over the past 4 years, you can see the tactics, techniques, and procedures of the left. They're no surprise anymore. You can almost predict when they're going to try to spin something to make it as though Donald Trump is responsible for this, or it could be a hurricane and he's responsible for that, or whatever. The virus spreading in the United States, they say Donald Trump is responsible for that. You can see that game. You can see how the game is played. Well, it's the same thing in Iraq, for instance, or in Afghanistan. They all share secrets. They know our tactics, our military's tactics, better than most people in our military, because they've been studying for almost 20 years in combat. So now they can manipulate the way they do things. But it's the same thing with Satan. You can see his tactics, techniques, and procedures. You can understand God because God is truth. And when you seek him, you will start to see how the things that he says and does and the way that he does them, you may not know why. And that's the difference between God and Satan. Why is a mystery to us because we're here for a reason. It's not to know why God has us here so that we can prove that we can be trained, trusted, and won't quit. That's a whole nother show. I'll do that sometime. But with Satan, it's easy to tell why because he's a narcissist. He's a liar and he wants power. And when you look at the progressive movement throughout history, it is the same. It is aligned with his ideological bend in his brain, his narcissism, his self-centeredness, and the belief that he knows better, that he will always know what's better. We used to call those people dissenters when I was in the SEAL teams. That's at least what I called them in my platoon. There was always a couple of dissenters or anywhere I would go. And not to say they weren't bad guys, but they could never flow with what the head shed, what the bosses were saying. They always had a better way to do it. And if it wasn't the head shed, it was whoever, like you could say to 5 guys, I want you to put this pallet together and get it ready to go on the plane. And I want you to be in charge, person number 1. I don't want to say any names. And there would be at least one dissenter in the group that would think person number 1 doesn't know what they're doing, even though it's a very simple task. And Satan is the father of that. And when you look at progressivism and you look at the way that it has functioned throughout history, that is progressivism to the T. So when you look at people who analyze this type of stuff that's happening with these riots, you have to understand that they are the same way. They are not qualified most of the time to make a true analysis of what is actually happening. And even if they are, they're so ideologically bent, narcissistic, and they're bent to the left. They are leftists, progressives, narcissistic, self-centered, and they're there to get that feeling, that rush that you get when you're on television. It is a rush, just like when you do radio. You know, I talked about Rush Limbaugh the other night. I was reading an article that he had where he just recently, because he's sick, he's real sick, and he's talking about, the adrenaline rush of doing that show every day for so many years. And these people thrive on that because if you're going to make a difference and you want to spread the truth, it's still a rush. Trust me, it's a rush. You come out of the studio after being on television and know that 1 million people have been watching you and you know that you spread some truth. It's a rush. People come up to you and say, thank you for, speaking out. It's a rush. I'm not an egotistical person, but I'm not going to lie. Any person who gets recognition is lying if they say it's not a rush in some sort of way. For me, it is an honor when people come up to me and say, thank you for telling me the truth on that. And, for this or that. And I say, listen, I'm just like you. I'm just a normal person who just happens to have some more insight. And I am called to share the truth. But other people, they thrive on that. And that's why famous people, when their show is canceled or they don't make another hit record or they've written a couple of great books and then they get dropped from a publisher because they didn't produce again, it crushes those people. Crushes them. All of that is why you have to police who you listen to. I have to feel that conservatives get this. I hope they do. But liberals, I got to tell you, first of all, anybody that's listened to this show before knows I hate those terms, conservative and liberal. I like to say constitutionalist, but a true conservative is not an ideological bend. Truly, conservative is not Republican. Conservative means that you are slow to change. and that you make basically systematic changes when they are needed. Liberal is an ideology. The Democrat Party if you say you're liberal, you can only, if that is your ideology, you cannot follow the Republican Party. You just will not. And you will not see eye to eye with conservatives. Whereas conservatives will not necessarily see eye to eye with the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is a professional political team. It's no different than the Dallas Cowboys and football. But when we look at the Democrat Party, you're not looking at necessarily, well, they are a professional political organization, but they are also an ideological movement. And so you have to understand, liberals, when you listen to the things that are told to you, it's being fed to you from an emotional standpoint. And quite often, like you're going to hear when I replay this soundbite from Phil Mudd, it's not true. So I just want to make this one thing known. I don't know Chris Cuomo, but I've been on television with him once or twice, maybe 3 times. I don't remember exactly. And every time I met him, he was super cool to me. I'm not talking, and I didn't see, he could be the most egotistical person in the world. I don't know. But to me, he was very cordial. He's a gentleman to me. And he truly thanked me for coming on there. This is before they went downhill into the Trump over the past 4 years and just got stuck in this narrative. But I'm ashamed at what he said. Not that I'm not ashamed of 10,000 things he said. I don't want you to think that I am a Chris Cuomo fan. I'm not. I just have to make it known that I thought I really, when I met the guy, he's nice. But listen, I have a lot of liberal friends. Rick Unger, I don't talk to him that often, but Rick Unger taught me a lot about being on the radio, and he's very left. But I love the guy to death. I think he's a remarkable person. But I do not agree with his politics at all. So when I play this soundbite, I'm disgusted by what Chris Cuomo says, but Phil Mudd repulses me. He literally repulses me. So let me play this. Let me pull this back up here. And I think you'll see where I'm going with this. So let's start here.
So the people you see on the streets and what's happening and why and by whom. All right. I want to bring in an expert on this. Phil Mudd, you've come to know as part of the CNN family.
Now, I've just explained to you for 32 minutes why Phil Mudd is not an expert. Okay, so right off the bat, everything that he says now, you can take as a leftist ideological rant, and the fact that he is a clickbaiter. Like, he's somebody who he gets off on the recognition. People walk up to him and say, thank you for saying that and sticking up for minorities. And he's going to relish that as though he's some kind of, God. When the fact, if you listen to this, he is not taking up for minorities. He is furthering the lie of learned helplessness.
Former CIA counterterrorism official, and obviously counterterrorism analyst.
Now, you notice that he did not say counterterrorism expert. I don't know if that was a slip on his part, but he was right, because he's no expert. Listen, you can be around. This is a perfect example. You could grow up on a dairy farm. You could even manage a dairy farm and still never have milked a cow. Now, you may be able on paper to say, you're going to pull the udder like this, and you're going to do, or you're going to put the machine on there, or you got to milk them at 5 in the morning and 5 in the evening. But the reality is, if you've never actually done it, your knowledge of analyzing the problems that happen on a dairy farm are going to be somewhat limited. So even when he is analyzing terrorism related issues, when he's like a security expert on all kinds of stuff, he even has his own little his own company where he speaks and is an analyst or advisor. It's not the same as if you had somebody who was operational. It's just not. Anyway, let's go on.
Phil, we've talked about this before. A crowd looks like a lot of, big group of people, but it doesn't mean they're all from the same place. They all have the same kind of face, and that they're all there for the same reason. You say what you're seeing right now worries you, actually, in some ways, more than 9/11 did. Why?
That is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, and he's going to further tell you about this. And by the way, this is going to be a longer soundbite than what I played at the beginning because this is the full soundbite. It's 4 minutes long.
Explain.
I would say worries. I'd use another word. It makes me more nervous. I remember being evacuated from the White House right there from near some of the scenes that we're seeing this evening on 9/11.
Now, you may be thinking right now, I don't really see anything wrong with what he's saying. There's a lot of conservatives out there that are saying, I'm very nervous. We've been saying that for a long time. We're very nervous for the country, but not for the reasons that you're going to hear from old Phil Mudd. Let's listen to this.
White House official then. There were professional concerns then, obviously going into 2002, 2003, but America was never disunited. In fact, if you remember everything from polling numbers to how America celebrated the death of Osama bin Laden 10 years later, 9/11 was a unifying period.
So he literally just said that the country has never been disunified, which is a lie. But then he goes on to say that 9/11 was a unification of the country. It was that it unified the country. Now, many people say, well, that is a truth. A lot of people came together after 9/11. And for a period of time, I would say, yes, I agree. It was unifying. But 9/11 in and of itself was the act that these individuals did was not a unifying moment for the country. It caused terror in people. It caused trillions of dollars to just disappear into nowhere for the quote unquote global war on terror that I still don't understand who's leading or planning that war. But later on, what happened as a result of 9/11 is that it really did cause the country to be divided. It really did. It was more of a divisive, it was the kickoff of a divisive time in this country because of the way that politics got involved with fighting a war, and because of the way media misled people, and because of the leftist executives in government and in the DOD. And quite frankly, because let's compare and contrast it to Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor happened. It greatly affected the nation. And then we went into war. And it wasn't like it is now, where 1% of the population goes off to war and you hear of a guy dying here or a guy dying there, or a helicopter goes down and kills 20 people, there. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people dying. You're talking about brothers, families going over, fathers and brothers and sons going over and never coming back. You're talking about real war that didn't only encompass the military and people running to get into the military, which increased in numbers by several million. You're talking about an entire nation that was then dedicated to the war fight. So yes, they were fighting it over there, but people over here, the factories were turning into making tanks or planes. People were, the whole nation just was involved. 9/11 happens. For a moment, people were united, and it lasted about as long as the planes were not flying. And as soon as planes started flying and people started going back to bars and they stopped being scared, the whole country just went kind of nuts. It's like people just stopped caring. And Tom Daschle, who was one of the most corrupt politicians to exist, as soon as he opened his mouth and started going down this political road after 9/11, it signaled something in the psyche of the nation. And from that point forward, we were divided worse than we had been since the 60s or since Vietnam, which was another whole political mess based on not subversive lies. We did need to have equal rights, but a war we shouldn't have been fighting the way we were fighting it, and civil rights developing that should have already been developed. But that's a whole nother story. Since 9/11, we have not been united. So automatically, right from the get-go, Phil Mudd is showing how little he knows about the reality of life in America.
And I'll tell you one thing, Chris, a lot of Americans don't have passports. They don't see third world countries where the line between chaos and a working democracy is pretty narrow. Americans have the luxury, and let me tell you, it's a myth, the luxury of believing.
So what he's about to tell you here is that the very essence of what America is a lie. He's going to tell you, as you will hear, that equality is not based in whether or not you get an equal chance. It's that you have equal opportunity to go out and make the chance or get the chance. You may show up to 10 job interviews and not get one, but you have the opportunity to go there because this is America. And if 5 people are racist and 4 people are not, but they know this guy or that guy, and then one person looks at you and says, I like who you are. You have the right qualities to be here, and they give you the job. You didn't get that because of equality. You got that job. Hopefully, you got that job because of the opportunity that was afforded to you by living in a free nation. But not according to what Phil Mudd says. That's all a lie.
That line between chaos and democracy is a mile wide. It's not. My bottom line about why I'm nervous is when I look at this, it makes me remember traveling overseas and remembering how comfortable Americans feel and believing that what we have today will last forever. I'm not sure it will.
What does that mean? Why not?
Now, I do agree with that. I agree with that. And you remember having this debate with Rick Unger at Sirius, and he was saying, no, the country will make it through these things. And I was like, no, I don't think it will. I'm not saying that it won't, but we may have a civil war ahead. And I still believe that may be the case. Or as Louis Gohmert said, we're already in a civil war. We just haven't gone to guns. Whether or not we go to guns, that decision's rapidly approaching, whether people realize it or not. This isn't the 60s. We're not talking about civil rights and making sure that everybody has equal voting and doesn't have to go to a bathroom because of the color of their skin. We're talking about, which I'm going to discuss here in a minute, we're talking about the reality of issues that exist that are self-perpetuated or are caused by learned helplessness and controlled. The problems are controlled by a leftist narrative. And I'll explain that in a minute, but let's listen to more of Phil Mudd.
Well, because if I walk down the street in an urban area I live in, we live in a myth that says every child is given a chance, every American is equal. The Constitution says that, the Founding Fathers say that. In the housing projects I live near, those kids will never have anything close to the opportunity that I had. They are separate and unequal. And until we accept that some people in this culture get a chance and some don't, some people get abused by police officers, I never will, we're going to have a problem in this country, and it might get worse.
Now, do you realize what he just said? He just said that we are separate and not equal, and that true freedom that is promised in the Constitution and by the Founding Fathers is a myth. Let's just listen to that part again.
Well, because if I walk down the street in an urban area I live in, we live in a myth that says every child is given a chance, every American is equal. The Constitution says that. The founding fathers say that. And
folks, this is a person that was an executive in the government. I think I said that before. Maybe I didn't. I want you to stop and think about that. This guy was an executive in the CIA and the FBI and worked in the White House. And this is not a one-off. This is not just a rogue guy who has this leftist mentality. This is Washington, D.C. This is the governors around the country. This is a large number of mayors, police chiefs, sheriffs, judges, congressmen, congresswomen, senators. This is at least half of the Supreme Court, and we know more than half because John Roberts is definitely a leftist, portraying to be a conservative. All right, so let's go on.
some people get abused by police officers. I never will. We're going to have a problem in this country.
Let me tell you something. If I was a cop and somebody like Phil Mudd smarted off at me and there's a reason to arrest him, he's going to get arrested just like anybody else. Just because he's white doesn't give him privilege to go around and say and do the things that he wants. I mean, technically right now, I believe he's part of a leftist movement in this country to overthrow the president. I think he's just as responsible as Mueller or Comey or Peter Strzok or Lisa Prostitute Page or any of these people. I think he's just as responsible. He is a mouthpiece for them.
Like it worse.
The idea that that truth becomes mitigated when the minorities, the aggrieved, take to the streets and break the same laws they say they want upheld. There are a lot of different ways to answer that. One of them is that don't blame all the bad things on the same people who are protesting outrage against their community. There are different factions. There can be agitators. There can be malefactors who take advantage of legitimate grief and pain. How true is that?
I think that's true. And in fact, you know, to get personal, every single person, I'm like you, every single person I've spoken with in the past few days has shifted from talking about the virus to talking about this, every single one. And I've been, I guess this is a plus side, I've been surprised at how every person I've spoken with has been able to separate out the sort of somewhere between disgust and discouragement about things like breaking into stores to steal T-shirts, and the fact that there's a recognition, separately, a recognition that this country is not an equal country. I think there is a conversation to be had that's being damaged.
See, no matter what he's talking about, and I actually let that go on a little bit too long right there because I got lost in what he's saying. No matter what he goes towards, like he said something about the virus and he starts talking about the reality of this, that he goes back to this separation that he says exists in this country. And many people would agree that there's a separation between whites and blacks in the way that you're treated in this country. Now, I don't disagree that there's a difference, and I'm going to explain that as well in a minute, but it's different. It's different than, say, the separation between the ruling class and the rest of us. It's a big difference there. Listen, I'm just going to go and explain this before I go to the rest of the soundbite. Here's the difference, okay? The ruling class in this country that is made up of politicians and rich and powerful. I mean, we've seen that these Silicon Valley weirdos, most of them are very weird, were able to make billions off of really our need for technology and to communicate, right? It's not like they created a country or like they cured cancer. These people gave us a platform to give our opinion and they became billionaires because of it. I mean, it's not like they did anything super great. Yeah, they have to have technical ideas about how to do, how to build a web page or how to program a computer, but when we look at SpaceX and Elon Musk, that's a different story. Most of the tech people that you meet in Silicon Valley or that you know of in Silicon Valley could never do what Elon Musk has done, because Elon Musk is more than just a computer geek. I mean, that guy puts his mind to something, and he does it when it comes to rockets and teamwork and putting people together. Amazing things happen. And that's different than the rest of these people. I would listen to what Elon Musk has to say, although he could have far off, he's an eccentric, so he could have far off ideas as well. But I would still listen to what he has to say. But when we look at the majority of these people that are in a power position, that come from Silicon Valley, that are in Washington, D.C., that are at the top of the agencies, all of them are very similar. They're really good at one thing. They're either good at getting themselves promoted, they're good at one tech issue, and so they ride that up into becoming a billionaire, or they're just master manipulators and they rise and they get themselves into positions, or they're pulled into positions in politics because they're ideologues or they're criminally connected. That is why they are all in a position that they don't get put in jail like we do for doing things like trying to overthrow the presidency or overthrow an election, which would get you and I put in jail and investigated as a group of conspirators. That doesn't happen in Washington, D.C., because they don't live by the same set of laws that we do. They are above the law. And I know everybody says, well, nobody's above the law. They are literally above the law. The Clintons have done more things that should get a person arrested than almost any human on this earth. And the same goes with many people in Washington, D.C., I wouldn't say conservatives, but Republicans and Democrats. But they live in a different world. Many of these people are they all know each other. They all shop together, eat together, go to church together. They all know each other. And many of the mega rich, which many of these people in Washington, D.C. are very, very wealthy, they, it's not like, you're like, I'm hungry, I'm going to go down to Wendy's and get a burger, or I think we'll cook steak tonight on the grill. These people say, I think I'm going to fly to New York from California and have that steak I really like. Or this weekend, we're going to go to London and hang out with so-and-sos for 2 days. Their friends are global. Their lives are not determined by their pocketbook. Their pocketbook is global. They can go wherever they want. And it doesn't mean that they're smarter. It means that they're global minded and that their reach of power is global. And so they're on a different level than we are. They are truly on a different level. I'm not saying it's better. I'm saying that it's above the law, and their class of people believe they know more than we do about everything. And when you meet these people and you talk to them, a lot of the times the arrogance is palpable, but also they're weird. You would never say, gosh, I really would. How many politicians, let me ask you this, how many politicians do you see that you would say, I'd like to have a beer with that guy? Louis Gohmert and a couple other people are the only ones I've ever met where I was like, that is a person. And I have sat down and had dinner with Louis Gohmert. Amazing experience. He's an amazing guy. Real experience in life. But the majority of these people, not so much. So that is a true separation. That is a real divide. That is something that is provable and is not our fault. I mean, it is kind of our fault as a citizenry because we haven't stopped it. But overall, it's not our fault. It's not like we're told and trained through learned helplessness to believe that they're better than us, because most people don't believe that they're better than us. But there's just literally the law and the way that it's built, because they own the law. And as George Carlin said, they're a part of this elite club and you're not in it. It's a true unethical divide in this country. Now, when we look at people that have dark skin versus people that have light skin versus people that have brown, or people that have their eyes are shaped differently, the reality with that is that there is no difference in who you are. It's got to be well over 99% of the people. No, I'd say 95% of the people, maybe 90. I don't know. It's up there. of the people in this country can't afford to go on a trip but once a year. They don't, it's not like they can just decide to run off to London and eat. Their lives exist within a bubble that is about no more than 30 miles around. They go to work. They go to the same place on the weekends. They eat the same food, drink the same drinks, have the same friends or not. And they grow up financially within $100,000 of each other. Now, I may be off a little bit on the money or the numbers, but it's by far the majority of people in this country, and really around the world for that matter. Most people in this country do not make over $100,000. And their lives do not exist without, I would say, more than 30 miles in any direction. So we're very similar in the way we're brought up. We're very similar in the capabilities that we have. We are exactly the same in the opportunity that's out there if we want to take it. Some of us have to work harder because maybe there is a prejudice or racism out there. I don't think it's as prevalent as they make it out to be. I don't believe sexism is as prevalent as they make it out to be. I think they make a lot of the issues about, for instance, women in special forces, they make that into something that it instead of looking at it from an effective standpoint of, can we get enough women to do this job to where they could carry a 200 and something? Listen, I know some big badass SEALs, and there's very few women that I know that are going to be able to drag a lifeless body with 70 pounds of body armor that weighs over 300 pounds out of a battlefield. Very few. And if we can't muster up enough women to create an effective fighting force that is female special forces that can integrate where their specialties are into special forces, then we shouldn't have them in special forces, because you're not going to one-off it. It's not a person in a wheelchair that you can build a ramp for and everything's fine. We're talking about completely different lifestyles that are going to be integrated and are going to break down this Spartan warrior mindset and lifestyle. But they don't, we don't look at things like that. So where opportunity may not exist, it may not be because somebody has a prejudice or they're sexist or they have a hatred of you. It may be because you're not cut out for that job. When I went out to try to be a cop multiple times after I graduated college, I was turned down, not because I wasn't qualified, not because I didn't have a double major and bachelor's degree in psychology and political science. It was because I was a white male. So they were more concerned with taking people based on the color of their skin or their gender than they were people who were really good at the job. And that's still going on today. So don't tell me that this lack of opportunity is something that is racist that's going on in this country. There's opportunity everywhere, because you know what? I kept trying. And eventually I got what I wanted to do. I achieved it. I found the opportunity. I got it. I made sure they couldn't tell me no. And I know people that would have dark skin. I know people who are Asian that did the same exact thing. And they never took no for an answer. But again, sometimes the opportunities are not there. Do you know how many people I know that want to be in radio or have asked me, hey, can you get me on television? And I look at them, I'm like, I don't say it to them, but I'm like, no, I'm not going to get you on television. There's no way you are going to walk on there and give advice because, one, you don't know how to carry on a sentence without saying 50,000 times. You got to go train more to get your speech down. And also, I'm not real sure that you have the experience, understanding, and knowledge to go on and give your opinion. So no, I'm not going to give you an in to TV or radio or interview you because people want me to interview them on the radio because they have an opinion on something. They're not qualified to be on there giving their opinion. Not when it comes to truth and absolute truth. there are always going to be obstacles in your way. It doesn't matter what color you are or sex you are, or doesn't matter. There's always going to be obstacles. Sometimes you can overcome those obstacles. Sometimes it's not an obstacle. It's just that you're not meant for that job. But that's different. It is different now in this country than it is with the separation between the ruling elite and us. We're governed by the same rules. I can guarantee you, if I walk outside with a gun and start waving it in the air and the cops come up and I don't put the gun down, I'm going to get shot. The ridiculousness of this narrative that's going all over TV right now, that the 6% of all young black males that die from gunshots, or I wouldn't even say gunshots, are killed by police. Now, I don't know if that statistic is real or not. That's a big statistic, that 6% of all young black males die at the hand of police. I don't believe that statistic. I don't know if, again, the statistics that they show that law enforcement tallies up a lot of the times are done for political reasons. That is a huge number. Huge number. Bigger than most people think. But the reality is, almost everyone in the country, black or white, man or woman, that are killed by police are done so because we're talking almost 100% here. It's like a fraction of a percent that don't fall in this category. Almost all of them are committing a crime, and most often it is a violent felony. And it ends up, or they decide to fight the cops. And something goes wrong and they get killed. Or they're unarmed in the eyes of the leftists in this country, and not just leftists, but a lot of citizens. They were unarmed when they drove that car at the cops, and they still shot him. A car weighs 3,000 pounds. I could hit you with a gun or a baseball bat. You may not die. But if I run you over with a car, there's a pretty good chance you're going to die. It's a weapon. The reality is, all of this stuff that you've been told and that you've been preached, because you're black or because you're white or because you're a woman, it's not true. Everybody has their hard time in life. If you're born poor, or if you're born crippled, or if you're born with dark skin and there's prejudice in the world, or you're born a woman and you want to be a Navy SEAL, there's all these different things that you may or may not get because of this or because of that. What you become is determined by you, because you live in a nation that ensures you have the freedom to try. Doesn't mean you're going to get it. Doesn't mean somebody's not going to be a racist. It doesn't mean that you're not big enough or strong enough. It means you have the opportunity to dream and to try. You can't ensure anything else. You can ensure everybody has a right to vote. You can ensure, I don't know, certain things like that. But you will never be able to ensure that that person is not prejudiced, that that person's not homophobic, that that person hates people with blonde or brown hair. You're never going to be able to make sure that doesn't exist. So you can't let that be your deciding factor. But that's what you're told is the deciding factor, is what they believe. It's a lie. You're told, and when you listen to these sound bites, you're told you have no hope if you grow up in the inner city, or if you're black, you have no hope, and that the country may fall because black people are just oppressed at every step in their life. It's a lie. And it doesn't matter if you are oppressed at every step of your life. You have the ability in this country to keep trying. That is how oppression is defeated. That's how it was defeated. And that's how it will always be defeated. Freedom is not gained from it being given to you. Freedom is gained by overcoming oppression and then ensuring that that freedom continues by a citizenry that continues to try. And that's what you're being lied to. Cops that work in the inner city are more aggressive. There's no doubt about it. I was an FBI agent. I worked in and around the inner city all the time. It's a dangerous place. You're not going to go into a pen with pit bulls and act the same way when you go into a pen with a bunch of kittens. You're not going to act the same. You're going to be more cautious. Most people wouldn't even want to go in there. Just like you're not going to, if you go swim in a lake, which is pretty much safe, right? And you're just going to go swim, except for some snakes that may be in there or something, not in Florida, you're going to be safe. But if I take you down to Florida and I say, yeah, you can go swim in that river, or that lake, but there's freaking alligators in there, so you got to be careful. You are not going to swim the same when you go in that river or that lake as you would the one where in Arkansas, there's no crocodiles or alligators. It's the same as being a cop. A cop that is serving in Beverly Hills is not going to see the same level of violent behavior and overt drug dealing that you're going to see in the inner city. You're not going to see the poverty and the downtrodden spirit and the people who just gave up on life because they were poor. You're not going to see I'm using Beverly Hills as an example. Not that I ever go to Beverly Hills, but you're not going to see in those locations trash everywhere and gang graffiti everywhere. You're not going to see that. And it's not because it's predominantly white. It's because the people it has nothing to do with Beverly Hills. It has to do with the inner city, and that the people from years and years and years of being told that you cannot make it out of here, that people just don't try. The breakdown of the family in the inner city communities, all these different factors, children out of wedlock, gangs being formed, gang violence being formed. All these things are happening because you all lost control of your lives. And you all started believing that there's no hope because you all were told that over and over and over and over. And as media grew and social media grew and politics got even worse and worse and more unethical, the lie became deeper. And then the subversives came in and they used that lie just like they use everything else, whether it be, you're gay or you're a woman or you're black or whatever. They use those to divide people because the way it works is the old Hegelian dialect, where it's you cause the problem, then you offer the solution, and then you handle the outcome. You literally formulate the solution. Like you go out and cause the problem, and then but they don't know that, and then you turn around and say, "Well, I think we should do this because that's the problem," and then people are like, "Oh, okay." And then you literally handle the entire solution yourself. That's the way the Hegelian dialect works. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Cause the issue, offer the solution, control the outcome. That's the way it works. That's what's happening. And you've been led down this road of the cause. They've said because you're black or because whatever, and people started believing that, and then they were told more and more that's the issue. It's because it's not. They keep telling you, like reality, the real problem that we can look at and we can compare and contrast it is this ruling elite in the country and around the world, and how they can get away with everything, and the rest of us, the majority of us, the true majority, will always fall under the rule of the law. They don't. And they have ways of manipulating so they get richer and more powerful. We don't. That is a true measurable problem. True measurable existence between those two classes. But when it comes to the color of your skin and the aggression of law enforcement in the inner city, it's because of you that live in the inner city. Now, I know people are going to say, oh my gosh, that guy just said that. Yes, it's true. It's true because you bought into the lie that they created. The inner city could be cleaned up tomorrow, just like Islam could clean up terrorism in a heartbeat. If they decided to progress and to stop the people that are the fundamentalists in their religion of doing what they do to carry out the terrorism, which is a tactic for political gain, to use killing, violence, intimidation, warfare for political gain. That's terrorism. Islam could fix that in a heartbeat if they wanted to. It's the same with the inner city. I know because I've seen places where it's happened. Enough people decided enough is enough. We got to clean this place. Let's just start by cleaning it up. They clean up a neighborhood. It changes the neighborhood. And then they get behind the police and say, listen, we're with you. These people are bad apples. They're drug dealers, gang members, and we will stand with you to clean this up and get those people out and start over fresh. Guess what, folks? None of that has anything to do with the color of your skin at all. That all has to do with living the lie that you've been told. And so what happens when I was going back there a second ago and I was talking about going into the cage with the pit bulls or the kittens or in a river that has no alligators versus a river that does, law enforcement goes into the inner city versus the law enforcement goes into Beverly Hills. Their actions are going to be different. If a cop goes in, if a precinct is set up and they act in the inner city the way that cops act based on the actions of the citizenry in that neighborhood, in a rich neighborhood where there's very little violence and no overt drug dealing. If you take that mentality and put it in the inner city, those cops will be decimated. They will literally be killed by gang members. None of the crime will ever be changed in those inner cities. If there were people that say, let's clean up this neighborhood, they'd have no chance at it. And that is where the real problem exists. Not in them. Not in the people that are racist or are prejudiced. It's not as prevalent as you think. And those people, you can eventually get around those people. In the day and age we live now, they'll be exposed. And even if they're not, don't concern yourself with them. Keep pushing, keep going forward. But the inner city is so pervasive, I think is the right word. Engulfed, that's the word. They're so engulfed in the lie that they most likely will never get out of it. They will always think that they're oppressed. They will never realize that they oppress themselves. They will always think that the cops treat them worse because they're black. The cops don't treat them worse because they're black. The cops treat them more aggressively because it's in the inner city and they could be killed at any moment a lot of the times in some of these places. Or because in the inner city, people don't care what the cops say. So they're disrespectful. And then the cops are disrespectful to them. The cops become more aggressive. And it's a cyclical, sick event that happens. Now, here's the one thing that you can throw on top of it, makes it all worse, is that the politicians that are leftists and the politicians that don't have any balls end up promoting, just like we were talking about before with old Phil Mudd, they end up promoting people who are not qualified for the job to lead police departments. They cut budgets and build a park that has, $100,000 worth of equipment on there, instead of, like, I don't know, asking somebody to come in and donate lumber for children so they can build something and time. They don't do that. They'll spend $100,000 on new equipment and not buy cops new guns, or not spend $100,000 on training, or pay a lawyer $100,000 to make sure that those people get fired. I don't know. But they don't. These executives in government promote executives that are not willing to do what it takes to create an effective law enforcement department. That is a tremendous aspect of this. Those people get promoted. They don't get funded. A lot of these people are not operators. They weren't good cops. They get promoted by people who are politicians, many of them leftists, and training goes downhill. They don't fire people that should be fired. They hire the wrong people to begin with, and this whole thing occurs. On top of it, they're hiring people because they have to fill a quota. And then the other people they hire, they're not paying close psychological attention to who they are. Now, on top of all this stuff that I've told you already, law enforcement around the country, and I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've been a part of it, I've seen it, is that they believe they are cops. They believe they are police officers. They believe they are the authority. And what they fail to realize is that, yes, they are the enforcers of the law. They do have authority, but they are not gods that walk around and must be feared. That's where law enforcement has messed up. The attitude that they have and that's developed out of the inner city, really, let's be honest, it's a combination between the inner city and the old boys club, from the way law enforcement was years ago, where, I'm the new sheriff in town. Well, I don't really care if you're the sheriff in town. Are you effective at policing, enforcing the laws, and ensuring safety? I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the new or old sheriff. Are you capable of doing that? You can do that with a smile on your face. You can do that without projecting the "I'm going to crush you" mentality. And that's a big problem, is that law enforcement has taken the mentality of dealing with the inner city. And again, that's not a racial statement, okay? That's a statement on the fact of what the reality of the inner city is: violent, poverty-stricken, and disrespectful to any law enforcement whatsoever. You take the mentality of dealing with that on a daily basis and you spread it nice and thick like peanut butter all across the entire United States in every department. And what do you get? You get cops that go out and treat people like crap. That when you say hello to them, they just look at you like you better not trip or I'm going to jump on top of you and beat you up and lock you up. I mean, that's the reality. And I remember when I left the FBI and I didn't have a badge anymore. I didn't have my creds, and I was walking my dogs down below where I lived in Manhattan. And it was after 12. So when I was in the FBI, I always worked nights. And so I would come with my dogs. We'd go down, we'd walk down there. If I ever saw any cops, I'd show them my credentials and they'd be like, "Oh, okay, just be careful." And I'd be, "Yeah, okay, I'm armed. I'm on the job. Okay, I'm good." And then I'd go back up. But when I didn't have my badge and my creds, and I went walking down there, and I had my road soda in my hand, my flip-flops on, and I had my dogs, and I walked down. It's like 1 o'clock at night. We weren't supposed to be in the park after 12 because de Blasio came in and ruined it for everybody. And so I go walking down there, and these two cops were in a car, and I remember them looking at me like I was about to commit some kind of severe drug felony. And it dawned on me, I don't have my creds anymore. I'm going to have to talk my way out of this if they come up to me. And sure enough, they did. I said, hey guys, I'm sorry. At just normal time that I usually walk my dogs, I just got out of the FBI. And they didn't care that I just got out of the FBI. They literally were looking at me as though I was a violent felon. And that's the wrong attitude. And see, it's not just because you're in the inner city and you're black. It's because you're in the inner city in a violent area. Cops are aggressive. But across the board, law enforcement has gotten this thing in their mind that they cannot be pillars of the community. They have to be the enforcers in the community, and they must be respected. And that's wrong. That's a wrong attitude. And again, it comes from the cyclical, continued cycle that is this Hegelian dialect that has been thrust upon us, and other aspects as well. Like I said before, just this growth of this tactical feeling in law enforcement around the country. Listen, I've been through enough law enforcement training and special forces training. I can smile and kill you just as fast as I can acting like a badass. I can curse you out and beat you up, or smile and beat you up. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't have to be an act. I can be very nice to you. But if you come at me, or if there's a threat, I'm going to take you down, because my tactics aren't attached to my emotions. They're attached to my job and what's effective for the time and place and space that I'm at. So I hold everybody accountable for this. But here's the thing that you have to remember. The separation that I talked about with the ruling elite and us is a true manufactured separation, but it's not just manufactured, it is real. You are not going to be in that club unless you just keep pushing, or you run for office and you get in there, and somehow you get in there. But majority of people will never be in that elite club. And when you do get into that club, you are now part of it, and you are not held to the same standard of the law as we are now as normal civilians. And that's a fact. But we didn't create that. The powerful created that because they got themselves in a position where they police themselves. But what's happening with law enforcement and I hate using the word, but black people in the country, I'm not like CNN and the rest of these people. I don't like saying black and white, and I just look at you as people. I look at myself as a person. But the problem that we're seeing, this outrage supposed with all these protests and things, is based on a lie. It's based on an issue that has manifested itself largely in part because of leftists in this country that have used things that happened years ago in the past to propel the inner city and different races into, and sexes and genders, into this mindset of oppression. We are oppressed. And the great lie is that it's not determined. The reality is, it is not determined by them. It is determined by us. But it's hard to get that truth out to people. And when I watch media and when I listen to these sound bites, this is what I see. I tweeted this out earlier tonight. This is what I tweeted. In the USA, minorities are limited when they believe opportunity is unattainable, which results from learned helplessness that is a result of leftist subversive indoctrination, which resulted from DNC and RNC corruption. That's the Republican and Democratic National Committees, that resulted because the citizenry gave away their power. That is everything I've been saying in a nutshell, as well as this tweet. actions of bad cops can result in the killing and injuring of innocent civilians, which is a result of bad hiring and bad training, which is a result of incompetent police executives, who are a result of bad politicians, who are a result of citizens failing to function as a citizenry. You see, it all comes back down to us. We the people, not black people and cops, not racist and bigots. It doesn't come down to them. It comes down to us. Do we give away our freedom, or do we hold on to it, cling to it, and stand together as a collection of free people? Leftists will tell you that that's not possible because of the bigots and the racists and because you grow up poor. But it's not true. It's absolutely not true. They are liars. And as I said at the beginning of this, they follow in the path of the great liar, of Satan. Let's finish up with this soundbite.
Property crimes going through these demonstrations, but the conversation I'm hearing is among friends, and these are mostly white people, is still focused on saying we have a.
First of all, there's no doubt, Phil Mudd, that your friends are white and probably wealthy, because you, as I've stated, are a part of that other group of people that are so out of touch with us, and you bought into and live in that separation from the reality of who we are. But the difference with Phil Mudd and other people that are rich and powerful, whatever, that may not get into politics, Phil Mudd is a part of the echo chamber of that lie.
An unequal country, and regardless of whether there's property crime here, regardless of the mix of people, anarchists, etc., involved here, when you see that photo in that video that we saw a few days ago, you got to look in the mirror, and my friends are doing this, and say, we can't live like this.
Now, there's nobody that thinks, well, there's probably a few stupid people, but nobody that I know that thinks what happened to George Floyd was a good thing. He was murdered by that cop. I think I've told this already on another podcast. When the cuffs, I don't care what George Floyd was doing before he got cuffed. Once those cuffs are on, your job as a police officer is now to protect him and protect yourself. Now, I'm hearing some rumors that they had him in the car and he was overreacting. They pulled him out. I don't know if that's true or not, but even if it was, you pull him out, or you just leave him in there. Or you pull it and you transport him immediately, or you pull him out, and sometimes they'll hog tie people and put them back in. Like they'll literally tie their cuff behind their back. They'll bend their knees up because they got them on their stomach, bend their knees up, and they either use cuffs or a rope, and they tie it around their feet and then tie that to the cuffs and then put them in, laying on their stomach in the car, and then they transport them immediately. But you don't sit on a guy, and there were 3 of them at one point. I don't care how rowdy the guy's becoming, because as soon as he shows that his behavior that's going to cause you injury or him injury, or other people around you, as soon as that behavior stops, you have to get him into a safe position. You don't just sit on somebody like that. And the fact that they worked together before for 7 years in a club and security, the whole thing is kind of strange to begin with. But nobody believes that I've met, especially in law enforcement, believes that the cop that did what he did and the other guys are not responsible for his death. They are. However, what you see happening out here in these riots and in these quote unquote protests have nothing to do with George Floyd and his death. And he goes on to say that, his friends are coming around saying, we can't live like this, as though what happened to George Floyd happens on a daily basis around this country to black people and only black people. Okay. Lots of people are killed in this country by law enforcement every year. But like I said, almost 100% of those people are involved in a crime or they fight cops and it doesn't end well. There's a small percentage of people that get killed by law enforcement that because of a result of negligence or a bad shoot where they like the guy in, there was either South or North Carolina that shot the guy in the back, who wasn't armed. Those are bad shoots. That guy went to jail, as he should. But those are very few and far between. It's not reality of the world that we live in, as Phil Mudd and his white friends his white elite friends think, or are trying to lead you to believe. And the people in the inner city that live in there and have to put up with the hyper aggressive law enforcement. If you want to understand why cops are hyper aggressive in and around those communities, look at what's happening with the looting. That is the same behavior that the cops deal with on a daily basis. Some of them for 20 years or more. Daily basis. That's the behavior. And so their behavior becomes tailored as they are trained by the environment in which they work. It's not what Phil Mudd is saying. It's not this point where they're going around carelessly killing people like George Floyd on a daily basis. That is not the world we live in. The reality is, where Phil is right, is that this nation is in a very precarious position, and we should be concerned. Where he is a liar is that he's saying it's because of the anarchy of whites killing blacks, and it's all because of white people. That's a lie.
Look, the truth is the minorities can't change the culture and the systems that don't treat them fairly and don't give them the opportunities that you were outlining earlier. Only the majority can. Only those with the power can.
Now, out of all the things that I've explained to you, can you sit and listen to that soundbite from Chris Cuomo that I just played and think that's true at all? It is the furthest. That's 180 degrees out from the truth. It doesn't matter who you are. You have the power of a free person. And the fact of him saying that the majority, this minority majority thing is crap. It's not real. It's another leftist invented term. Why should it matter? If you don't want to be judged by the color of your skin, why should the color of your skin matter? Why should you be picked for a job based on the color of your skin? If I had dark skin, or let's say because I'm white and I knew that there were people out there that hated, when there are plenty of people out there that hate white people, I'm not going to allow those people to determine where I achieve in life. And if it was to the point where white cops and law enforcement in general were going around and killing people like what happened to George Floyd on a daily basis for the reasons it happened to George Floyd, I can guarantee you that, for one, it wouldn't just be happening to black people. People have dark skin. It'd be happening to everybody because authority, unchecked, knows no bounds. And second, the rest of the country would turn in an instant. It is not a fact of life. If you live in the inner city and your experience with cops is bad, it's because you live in the inner city. And it's because the majority of things that the cops deal with in the inner city are exactly like the behaviors you're seeing in the riots. I'm not saying everybody in the inner city is bad. I'm saying that's the culture in the inner city. I'm not saying that culture is black. It's the culture of poverty. It's the culture of institutionalization. That's the reality when you live in the inner city. You're institutionalized because you're being told that you can't escape. All of which is not true. But when you listen to Phil Mudd and you listen to what he has to say, and then you listen to Chris Cuomo right there, if you go by that narrative, you have no hope. You will never escape.
And that is the reality. And it always has been, and we haven't faced it up the way we need to. Phil Mudd, thank you for always coming straight.
We haven't faced it the way we should. It's a cyclical event. It's this event that it's like the evil yin and yang. And it has nothing to do, and I'm not going to beat on this dead horse anymore. It has nothing to do with oppression. You don't know oppression in this country. You may know poverty. You may know what it means to live in the inner city and have dark skin and have law enforcement or people that own stores look at you as though you may do something. But like I said a minute ago, if you put people, even yourself, if I took somebody from the inner city who said they're being oppressed and that the cops always treat them bad and that store owners look at them weird when they wear a hoodie, if I took that person and I said, okay, here's a pen full of kittens, and over there's a pen full of pit bulls that may or may not bite you, and I took that person from the inner city, I don't care if it's a gang member, a grandma, I don't care, or from anywhere else for that matter, and I put them in the pen with kittens, they're not going to be worried at all. They're not going to look at those kittens as though I may get attacked here, and they're going to walk in there on their own and not worry. But if I take them into the pen, well, let's say it's not even pit bulls. Let's say it's Jack Russell Terriers, German Shepherds, wiener dogs, and pit bulls. And I take you in there, or I send somebody in there first and they get bit. And then I send 3 other people in there and they don't get bit. And I send you in there. You are going to walk in there with an attitude of, I may get bit. And I'm going to watch that dog, and I'm going to watch that dog. I'm not going to watch that Jack Russell because he didn't bite that guy. It was that pit bull over there. You see how this prejudice starts to form? It's not because you hate pit bulls. I'm assuming that you don't. But it's because day after day, you sat there and watched people get bit by that pit bull that may not be related to any other pit bull. But you're going to think, that pit bulls are dangerous because you're being programmed to believe that. That is similar to what happens to law enforcement. That's similar to what you're facing as a black man or a black woman or anybody else, even Latinos or even white people that live in the inner city. You face that. Look, I grew up poor. I lived in a trailer park. When law enforcement had to come in there, it was just different the way they expected something bad to happen in there. But it's because what they deal with when they go in there is different than what they're going to deal with when they go to a rich area where there's not overt crime and drug dealing. It's not about you. Don't make it about you. It's about the community. And I don't care what Chris Cuomo says. I think that every person, black or white, male or female, inner city, poor, rural, in the middle of nowhere like I grew up, or living in the city, not in the inner city, but just in the city, and rich. If you want to be something, you can be it. If you want to make a change to the community, you can make it. If you want to be a part of, heaven forbid, of that elitist group that's above the law, hey, shoot for the stars. But don't buy into the lie any longer. Don't buy into the protest. Don't buy into these idiots on television and radio that tell you otherwise. It's not true. You live in a free country. And if you live in a community that is as bad as many of these inner cities are, make it your life goal to get out. You can do it. I don't care what they say. And you won't end up beat up by the cops or shot or where somebody sits on you. You're not going to end up that way. You're going to end up free and successful. And trust me when I tell you this. I know for a fact. if enough people in a neighborhood or a community do that, hold themselves accountable, clean it up, eventually law enforcement will change as well. Their behavior and their attitudes will change as well. But the way we're going, nothing's going to change. But tell you what's going to end up happening. Somebody's going to end up getting shot today or this week in one of these riots, and the Democrats are going to turn around and try to turn it into a Donald Trump issue when it's not. It's a state and city issue. So I hope that makes sense to people. I know some people might listen to this and say, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a racist. You're white. I'm not a racist. I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not black. I'm not Asian. I'm an American. I'm an American. I have had my life experiences, my poverty. My father died when I was 13. He left when I was 9. I've been through all my issues. I had learning disabilities. I've had my problems, but I never let it stop me from dreaming, and I never stopped trying to achieve my dreams. I'm not perfect, but I made it out. You can too. And there's no white privilege. I never got a handout. I got turned down for everything I achieved in my life. I got turned down a minimum of 3 times. And I just kept going. And doesn't mean that I ended up being the best. Sometimes I was the worst of the best and the best of the worst. No, I was the worst of the best and the best of the worst. But I kept trying. And that's not all you can do, but that's where you should start, and you will succeed. It's really that simple. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. And that, my friends, is episode 37. Remember that number, and remember that I made this prediction that if the leftists get their way, they're going to keep these protests up until somebody gets shot or multiple people get shot. If they keep burning stuff down, it's going to escalate. And when that happens, they're going to turn it on Donald Trump and say it's his fault. You heard it here first. Actually, you heard it on Twitter first because I said it there. I love all of you. I don't see color. You shouldn't see your color. You should see your potential because you live in a free country. God bless all of you. God bless law enforcement. God bless everybody in the inner city and this poor. But listen, you're not here to be the end-all be-all in this world. What you do here determines what your end-all be-all is in the next one. Trust me on that. God knows that. You should know it. And remember, I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.
There's a group of residents who live in this area, and they have blocked the front of this Target store to prevent it from being looted. You can see there are some people who have a political message out here.
Peace.